Warning, this program will discuss adult themes. Viewer discretion is advised.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, good evening. I hope everybody's having a good conference. Yeah, very good. Good, good, good. This is my first conference, so I'm really excited to be here. I wasn't going to be here except that, of course, God called me here through Angelo and Father Czech. But yeah, I'm very, very impressed with the conference and with all of you, and I'm really, really glad that I was here. Actually, so I have to say, well, first of all, my name is Rilene. I guess we covered that. But I was very reluctant to give my testimony, and but I decided to give it anyway. The reason I was reluctant probably is not the reason you would expect, actually. It's not because Father Czech put some kind of burden on me like he's worried about doing, but it's because honestly, I feel very, very far removed from my same-sex attraction. Over the years, God has brought me the grace to gradually move away from it and to learn that it wasn't really where I belonged. And so it seems like maybe an echo of my former self or something like that, but it doesn't really seem that much to me as a part of my identity anymore. So I thought, well, you know, that doesn't, is this really going to be helpful for anybody? You know, if I'm not that identified in that way. But when I did come back to Jesus Christ through his church here on earth, I did tell God that I wanted to do his will. And since I'm very hard of hearing when it comes to that, that he had to hit me over the head with things when there is something that he wants me to do. And he's presented me with a lot of opportunities, interestingly enough, to do his will. And I think this was one of them. So I am here, number one, because I am trying to do God's will and do some reparation for some of the things that I've done in the past. And the second reason is because if there is anything that I could possibly say that would be of help to anybody, I would like to do that. So, but then having said all that, in spite of that and because of that, I'm really delighted to be here. I think that it's a beautiful, beautiful conference. I've met so many wonderful people, and I would like to personally thank every member of the clergy and religious who are here. My gosh, yeah, please, a round of applause for them, because it's so very, it's uplifting. It's uplifting to meet priests and brothers and sisters who care so much about this population and our population. And I think it takes quite a bit of personal sacrifice on their part to actually be associated with us. Frankly, that's just my assessment of things. So I want to thank all of you. And also all the Courage and Encourage people here as well. I think that Courage is an aptly named organization. Let's put it that way. Okay. So let me give you a little bit about my background and where I came. And there will be some things actually in my testimony that are strikingly familiar from Carl's. I don't know how that could be, but nevertheless, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So that's actually on the opposite side of the state from Philadelphia, which so many people get confused out west. But I think probably if you're from the east, you get it. But so I grew up in Pittsburgh. I came from a half-Catholic family. And what I mean by that is that my mother and all of her side of the family were Catholic, but my father was not. And so You might think that might have turned out to be a little schizophrenic, but, well, let me just say, my father had 4 wives, not all at once, sequentially. And so he had 4 wives, and this is an interesting thing. Every one of them was Catholic. He was a Baptist himself. But every wife was Catholic, and he picked them because he felt assured that they would not ever cheat on him. Which was probably true, I suppose. I don't know. But so anyway, but so my mother was Catholic. He was not, and they were divorced very quickly after they were married. She had my brother first, and then me. And while she was I was not even a year old, she divorced my father. She was still pregnant with my little sister. And she divorced him because he was a violent alcoholic. My mother had grown up with a father who was a violent alcoholic. And so when she went shopping for a husband, she found a violent alcoholic. So, but I don't want to make the focus of this too much about my family. I love my family very much, and my mother was a good mother. Where's Father from this morning? I think the thing that we have to keep in mind about our parents is that, for the most part, every single one of them did the very best that they could with what they had to work with. And I know that part of the reason that I'm here today and not living the life that I was living is because of the prayers of my mother. So just for all of you parents out there praying for your kids, it works. Prayer works. God's listening. And he's working on all of your kids. Really, he is. So, and that's part of my message today is God's persistence and how he is pursuing us relentlessly. So I grew up in this family. My parents were divorced. Mostly we didn't see my father. And everything seemed normal. In fact, when I was a little girl, I was going to be a nun when I grew up. I thought that was a great idea. I thought that was a really good thing. And I was pretty religious as a child. And but then I hit my teenage years, and I became very, very, I would say, covertly rebellious. And eventually I got exposed to some sexual things. And in my late teens and early 20s, well, I started kind of drifting away from the church as soon as I began exploring sexual things, right? Because there's that big chasm, that big tension, that cognitive dissonance between the values that you hold as a Catholic or a child of God, right? And all the pull towards the sexual stuff. So I started exploring sexual things. I was unfortunately exposed to pornography in my early teens, and by the time I was in my late teens, I was having heterosexual sex, and not very, let's say it was, obviously just the fact that I wasn't married made it disordered, but even more so than that. Let's just say that. And so, of course, that pushed me further and further away from God. I have to recall back to the Benedictine nuns who I spent 1st through 8th grade with, and they told me sin was a slippery slope. Turns out they were right. I don't know. I didn't believe much of what anybody told me because really through my whole upbringing, I always felt that I was the smartest person in the room and that everybody else was stupid. And that was like my mother was at the top of the list as far as stupid was concerned. But so many things that the nuns and my mother told me turned out to be true. I can't figure it out. But so anyway, yeah, so I drifted away from the church, but I was in this heterosexual things for a while, and but I ended that because it was really, really unhealthy and sad and pathetic. And then I went for about 3 years, and not a single man asked me out on a date. Now, you might look at me right now and say, well, of course not. But at the time, I was really young and cute. But yes, I went through this really dry spell of about 3 years, and not one guy asked me out. And unfortunately, what that did was it confirmed in me an idea that was deep in my psyche from my very childhood, that no man is ever coming for me. And so I didn't really know, through this whole 3-year dry spell, what was going to happen. I started feeling quite desperate, actually, because I wanted a family, and I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to love somebody. So I had been away from the church. My godparents invited me to participate in a folk group. This was in 1970s. And they went to a church that had a folk group going, and they needed singers, and so they invited me to come be a part of that. And actually, so it was in that folk group that I met a woman who was gay. And I didn't know it, but I don't drink. I don't think I mentioned that. Unlike a lot of other people, but like many people who are children of alcoholics, you kind of either go one way or the other, right, with that. And I went with the I don't drink approach. So I don't drink at all, but it was a Catholic party in a, Pittsburgh neighborhood, and so there was a lot of drinking going on. And this woman who was there was fairly well under the weather. And, but I was the only sober one in the room, so it was very clear to me, things that weren't clear to anybody else. So, so she starts paying a lot of attention to me, and, we're looking at photographs that I had taken, and she was a photographer too, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, at one point, I recognized what was going on, and I didn't think that about myself yet. I didn't think that being with a woman had any potential for me at all. It never occurred to me, to tell you the truth. But so I took her aside, and I said, I'm not interested. Thank you for the attention, and that's not me. I'm really just not interested. And she was quite shocked that I had recognized that she was interested in me. But, the interesting thing was, over the next couple weeks, she was gently persistent, and I had this wound, if you will, and that no man was ever coming for me. And so it was just kind of the perfect storm of circumstances. And I eventually said, well, maybe I need to give this a try, because maybe this is who I am. Maybe this is why the other stuff is not working for me with men. And so I gave it a try, and it was very exciting and very powerful. And I could not have told you at the time why that was so. I think in retrospect, of course, knowing all the things that I know now and all the work that I've done since then, I think I could tell you very well, why it had such a pull for me. But it was a very powerful experience, and so I was kind of locked in. And we had a very short, turbulent relationship. Oddly enough, it didn't work out. Go figure. But after that relationship, I started thinking about things and thinking, well, was this just a quirk? Was just some kind of connection with this particular person? Or is this who I am? Am I gay? Am I a lesbian? And so I went out. I had a job at the time where I was traveling around the country, and I made a very lame attempt to go to a gay bar in Philly, actually, and didn't quite make it there, but they had this bookstore. It wasn't the one you mentioned, though. It was called, I don't know, someone's like the big metropolis for this, I guess. It was called Giovanni's Room, yeah. So I went there and I got the gay guide, told you, you know, every bar in the country, every place to meet somebody. And so the next trip that I went on was to Phoenix, Arizona. And I went to a bar in Phoenix, Arizona called The Full Moon. And I met a woman there that night. And from there, that woman became my partner for 25 years. So it is really true, that joke that you hear, what does the lesbian drive on her second date? A U-Haul. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that one, okay. So, true enough, right? Well, we're women, we're trying to make nests. We want to make a nest and a family and a place to, you know, to come home to. And so that's, yeah, so we were together for 25 years. During that time, we really were both professional women. We made a lot of money, and we had a very affluent lifestyle. We, however, somehow arranged our lives so that we were always on the road and always traveling. And so for me, like Monday through Friday, I was out of town, and I would come back in on the weekends just exhausted from being out of town and, you know, running through airports and all that stuff that you do. And so so even though we thought we had a relationship, in retrospect, you can look at it and you could say we spent at least 5 days a week avoiding each other, really. But we do arrange our lives. That's one thing, one perspective I got actually from Dr. Laura. I love Dr. Laura. I haven't listened to her for a while, but I spent like 10 years in therapy, radiotherapy with her. It's a lot cheaper than. So one thing I got from her is that it's not an accident, the life you live. The life you live is the life you've chosen to live. And if you're traveling and away from your spouse for 5 days a week, it's because that's the way that you've arranged it. But what I didn't know, but what I really should have been seeing about myself was I was living on two different levels. I was living a life externally that I exposed to the rest of the world that was my businesswoman, competent, in control, affluent. That was that persona. And then at home, I was this introverted, quiet person just living my life in my own head. Not really even living that well with her. I had kind of a whole separate fantasy life going on in my head that I didn't share with her or with anybody else. And it was a big disconnect. It was dishonest. It wasn't authentic. I wasn't presenting myself. I was a little bit like what you heard from Carl in a way. I wanted to please. I pleased a lot of people, but pleasing them meant turning into whatever they wanted me to be. So it's kind of a chameleon life. And the whole time, well, actually, since my teenagerhood, I was just searching. I couldn't understand why I wasn't happy, why I couldn't find happiness. Did the whole self-help thing too. I love that when you said that, especially about giving books to other people who needed them. That was beautiful. But, I read a lot of books. That's actually how I got introduced to Dr. Laura. But, I went through all those stages, too, of searching for God. I didn't know I was searching for God, but I was searching for something. And so I did the self-help stuff. I did Anthony Robbins. But by the way, I've done the fire walk, and I have a little scar on my foot to prove it. But does everybody know what the fire walk is, right? Oh, I'm sorry. So, what, you haven't all done this? So the firewalk is where you walk across in your bare foot from maybe where I am here to the end of the stage here over hot coals. So that was amazing. That was a very amazing experience. Anyway, our bodies, our human bodies, the way God designed them, are incredible. That you could actually do that and come away with nothing as far as injuries are concerned is incredible. Boy, Adam and Eve really messed it up for us. But yeah, so I did all those kinds of searching and seeking and looking for the answers, and why am I not happy, and why can't I, I have all these material possessions, and I live in a big house, and have granite countertops, and hey, if anybody was in the women's session that we had the other day, granite countertops are very important to me because they're part of the whole cooking, luring people into my life thing. But, yeah, I just wasn't happy. And even my partner would say to me things like, why are you always reading that stuff? What is wrong? Why are you not just satisfied with what we've got? And I couldn't tell you why I wasn't satisfied with what we had. We had a lot, but I wasn't. And so God kept working in my life, and He, in retrospect, you can look back and you can see all the ways that He worked in your life. You don't really realize it when it's happening. But He kept, trying to correct my course a little bit. And I consider all of those things that I did and that I read just little course corrections from God saying, right, get over that way and, move a little to the center. And so Dr. Laura was one of the influences in my life, actually. As I grew away from the church and had to reject the church, in order to continue in my sinful lifestyle, I justified myself by coming to the conclusion that God was necessary for poor people and desperate people. This is my arrogance. I'm so sorry that I have to say this in public, but He was necessary for poor people and people who are in hurting situations, but for competent people, we don't need God. I mean, we don't need to make up this supernatural being who's in control of things. Because if you're in control of things, if you've got it together, that little fairy tale isn't necessary. So I was first agnostic and then kind of atheist, and then, oh my gosh, all the things that I've gotten into. But when I encountered Dr. Laura, who has a doctorate in something like, I don't know, bio something or other, and she had this real common sense approach. Excuse me. It occurred to me that you really could be intelligent and still believe in God. And that was kind of new to me. Because all the people I hung out with, of course, you collect people around you who are just like you or support your values and so on. And so it was a new idea to me that you could be smart and still believe in God. And so I really thank her for that. I'm sorry about this. I do need to... Okay. No, I'm good. Thanks. Okay. So that's Dr. Laura was a big influence on my life. As I really said, I meant that. I listened to her for 10 years, and by the time I was finished listening to her, I could really predict how she was going to answer questions. And one of the big things that I learned from her, at first you just listened because it was like watching a train wreck. You really couldn't take your eyes off of it. I was thinking to myself, now, why do these people call her? Because they are going to get blasted. So many people call her and say, I've been a listener for 16 years, and now I have this problem. And then she'd present a problem that she's in the wrong, and Dr. Laura doesn't pull any punches, and she's just going to, boom, hit her with it right between the eyes. So it was like, I thought, boy, this one is really abrasive, and I could not take my ears off of her. So I listened to her, and I listened to her, and one of the other things that she taught me was that the person, sometimes people did call in where it really, in the situation, if they were presenting it honestly, it wasn't their fault. They weren't the ones who were nuts, right? The caller is not always the one who's nuts, but the caller is always the one that she made change or advised them to change in whatever particular way. And finally, I realized that was because it has nothing to do with fault. The caller is the only person she's got. So that's the person who has to do the work, right? So I thought that was an excellent lesson. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up a little bit on the whole influences side. I did the Anthony Robbins. I did Dr. Laura. Gosh, the answer. Oh my gosh. Some of these things that I did were really way off base, But God protected me somehow from going deep into the ones that were new age and creepy and weird. Although at one point I did consider, I had this beautiful box that was kind of enameled, whatever. And one of these things that I went to was saying that, you ask the universe for what you want, and the universe will provide it. And so you're supposed to get this nice, beautiful box, and you're supposed to write down all your requests, and you're supposed to drop them in the box, and then the universe is going to deliver them to you. I told you. Did I warn you that I'm nuts? Okay. Anyway, so some people, what is that saying? There is a saying, right? It's like, if you don't believe in anything, you'll believe anything? Something like that. Yeah. So that's the truth. Anyway, I was searching and searching and searching, and God was gradually working on me, and he did all this work. But the net of it is, the last 10 years of my 25 years with my partner, I was growing out of it, and I was growing into the realization that I was in the wrong place. And two things really kept me there. One part of it was I had made a commitment to this woman, and I didn't really know how to not follow through on that. And the second part was, because of my family circumstances, we grew up poor in my house, and so financial security was very, very important to me, and we had that. And I can remember in my early 40s, it was on my birthday, and we were living down in Monterey County in California, and I was having a terrible birthday. I was crying all day. I didn't know why, and I went out and thought about my life and thought about things, and I said, I know I don't belong here, but I don't think I can give up the material things and the financial resources. Now, you're all Catholic, so don't ever pray like that unless you are prepared for the consequences. Because God heard that, and within the next few years really wiped out everything that we owned. I have no 401k, I'm up to my ears in debt. But he took care of it for me, right? He really put it to God and he'll handle it. Of course, at the time, I did not know it. He was the one handling it. But anyway, nevertheless, bad investments and all kinds of things took place. It put a huge pressure on my relationship with my partner. And so things were getting worse and worse and more uncomfortable, and there were job losses, and there were bad investments and all kinds of things, and there was a growing tension between us, but we were still hacking through it and living together and trying to make a go of it. And in the spring of 2008, there was a short window of time where the Supreme Court of California said that we couldn't discriminate against same-sex couples, and that made same-sex marriage legal in California. And my partner said to me at breakfast one day, she said, I think we should get married. I think it's now or never. The Proposition 8 people were starting to gain momentum, and they were working on getting an injunction and so on. And she said, I think we should get married. And I said, no, I can't do that. And that was the crushing blow that really brought about the end of the relationship. And by September of 2008, she had left me. And that was a very good thing, because I don't know if I could have left on my own. I was very dependent emotionally, and even though there were no finances left to be dependent on, you have these habits of a lifetime, and you have things entangled, and so she left me, and I started to be able to get some perspective. I kind of stepped back from things, and at that point in time, I have to tell you, by that time, I could not even imagine myself going to pursue a relationship with another woman. All of that, those years of work and trying to understand things had at least brought me to that point of those two things. One, I could not marry another woman. And two, I didn't want to have that kind of relationship with another woman. And so in January of 2009, I started into therapy, and again, God has blessed me in so many ways and brought the right people to me at the right time, or served me up to the right people, whichever that needed to be. Anyway, so I started in therapy, and for about the first 6 months, I did all the work that was required to build the trust in the relationship with the therapist. And in June, we were talking about relationships, and she said to me, do you believe in God? I thought this was therapy. Are we? Holy cow. Do you believe in God? And I said, I had to think about it a little bit, because I had discarded all that stuff, I had gotten rid of all that, but I somehow made it through to my honest self. And I said, yeah, I do believe in God. And she said, how is your relationship with God? Because God is our first and primary relationship. And if we don't get that right, how can we develop other relationships that are healthy? So the following Sunday at 8 a.m. Mass at Holy Family, I was sitting there in the back pew, scrunched down as we do when we're in the back pew. And then the following Sunday, I was sitting there in the back pew again at 8 o'clock Mass. And I felt the most powerful pull toward the Eucharist. I cannot tell you the yearning that I felt at that time. It was more powerful than anything I had felt in my whole life. And so on July 4th, a Saturday, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is when Holy Family has its confessions, I found myself in the confessional saying, actually, let's all say it together, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." It's been 35 years since my last confession. And I don't really remember how to do this, Father. Can you help me? And he did. We went through each of the 10 Commandments. And thank heavens it was the 4th of July, because nobody was around, and he was even outside. it never occurred to me that I should have set aside, made an appointment. Hello, Father. Oh, so funny. But anyway, yeah, it was a nice long confession. And Father, I have to tell you, compared to your experience, Carl, this father, his name is Father Bob Pasalacqua. He told me about his priesthood and about his grandchildren. So he was a late-in-life priest, and he brought so much wisdom and so much healing and caring. And I am so grateful to the Catholic Church for not having changed in that whole 35 years. And and I'm grateful to God for his perseverance in his pursuit of me. And I would like to say to you, if you're not sure about things, he is pursuing you. And he is relentless. And he loves you more than you know. And if you're a parent, I would like to say to you also, it's always hard to believe for parents, but God loves your children even more than you do. And he was there from the beginning, and he was there for every single thing that your children experienced. And you have to trust them to him, because he is our faithful God, and he's forgiving and merciful. And he wants each and every one of us. And there's nothing that you can do that compares to what he's going to do to bring your child back to him. And so your job is to pray and pray and pray, which is what my mother did. I'll just wrap up the story. I lost my mother in 2010, but the fall before, I was able to tell her that I was no longer in relationship with my partner, and that I was no longer gay, and that I was in therapy and getting help. And she said, "Thank God, at least one of my prayers were answered." Yeah, so, I guess that's it for me. That's all I have to say, but I thank you. I'm grateful for the chance to have been here, and I salute you all.